My name is Elena Rodriguez. I am 41 years old, and I live in Maracaibo, Venezuela. If someone had told me a few years ago that I would be here one day, sharing something that would shake the way people see the future, I would have smiled politely and dismissed it. Not because I didn't believe in God, but because I was tired. Deeply tired. Spiritually exhausted. My life was ordinary, painfully ordinary. Every morning I woke up before sunrise. I made coffee in silence, standing by the window, watching the city slowly come alive while something inside me felt completely asleep. I kept asking myself when life had stopped feeling alive and started feeling like survival. I worked as an administrative assistant at a private clinic. Paperwork, numbers, schedules, endless routines. I helped organize other people's lives while my own faith felt disorganized, dusty, pushed into a corner. I believed in Jesus, or at least I said I did. But if I'm honest with you, my faith had become distant, mechanical, weak. I prayed out of habit, not expectation. I opened the Bible looking for comfort, but closed it whenever the answers demanded change. At night, when the noise of the day finally faded, one question always returned. Quiet, heavy, relentless. Does God still speak to ordinary people like me? Maybe you've asked that too. Maybe you're living your routine right now, listening to this, feeling that silent emptiness you can't explain. You go to work, take care of your family, pay your bills, but deep inside, something feels missing. I wasn't angry at God. I was afraid he had stopped listening. There were moments when I felt him close, during worship songs, or when someone prayed with conviction. But those moments never lasted. Life always pulled me back. Fear always spoke louder. And yet, something was changing. Weeks before everything happened, I began feeling an unexplainable restlessness. A pressure in my chest that wasn't anxiety, but urgency. I started waking up at the same hour every night, my heart racing, my mind flooded with thoughts about the future, about nations, about suffering, about time running out. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was stress, work, the country, the news. But deep down, I knew this wasn't coming from the world. It was coming from somewhere else. One night, after another restless awakening, I whispered a prayer I had never dared to pray before. Jesus, if you still speak, please don't pass me by. I didn't know it then, but that question, spoken through tears and exhaustion, would mark the last night of my old life. Because soon, I would receive an answer, and it would come in a way I never imagined. Who I was, before everything happened. Before my life was divided into before and after, I was simply trying to survive. I wasn't someone people would call spiritual. I didn't preach, I didn't post verses online, and I certainly didn't think God had a special plan involving me. I was invisible in the way millions of people are invisible. Faithful enough to believe, tired enough to doubt, and busy enough to postpone deeper questions. I lived with my younger sister and my mother. My father had passed away years earlier, and since then, I had quietly taken on the role of the strong one, the responsible one, the one who didn't fall apart, even when everything felt heavy inside. At the clinic where I worked, I was known as dependable. I arrived early, left late, and rarely complained. But what no one saw was how drained I felt at the end of each day. I would sit on the bus ride home, staring out the window, watching people rush by and wondering if this was all life would ever be. Faith for me had become something private and fragile. I believed in Jesus, yes, but belief felt different from trust. I trusted routines more than promises. I trusted what I could see more than what I prayed for. There were nights I cried quietly so no one would hear. Not because something dramatic had happened, but because nothing was happening. No direction, no clarity. Just time passing, one day melting into the next. And yet, despite all that, something inside me still longed for meaning. I used to remember how, as a child, I believed God was close. I talked to him freely, without fear of disappointment. Somewhere along the way, adulthood had taught me to lower my expectations, not just of life, but of God. I told myself, he has bigger things to worry about, bigger people to speak to, pastors, prophets, missionaries, not an administrative assistant in a struggling country. Still, the signs started coming. At work, I began overhearing conversations that unsettled me. Patients speaking about fear, doctors whispering about shortages, instability, things they couldn't explain. On the news, reports grew darker. Nations arguing, economies shaking, a sense that the world was standing on fragile ground. But what disturbed me most wasn't what I saw. It was what I felt. I began having vivid dreams. Not symbolic dreams, but intense ones. I would wake up with my heart racing, my hands trembling, a deep sense of urgency pressing against my chest. In these dreams, I saw crowds of people looking upward, not in worship, but in confusion and fear. I didn't understand what it meant, and that terrified me. I tried to push it away. I told myself I was overthinking, that stress was affecting my sleep, that faith mixed with anxiety could create illusions. So I did what many people do. I distracted myself. More work, more noise, less silence. But silence has a way of finding you anyway. One evening, while organizing old documents at home, I found my father's Bible. It was worn, full of handwritten notes in the margins. I hadn't opened it since his funeral. As I flipped through the pages, a verse caught my attention. Not because I was looking for it, but because it felt like it was looking at me. It spoke about God choosing the weak to deliver his messages, about voices crying out in times of warning. I closed the book immediately, my heart pounding. No, not me. That night I prayed, but not the polite kind of prayer. It was raw, almost angry. Jesus, I don't want visions. I don't want responsibility. I just want peace. But peace didn't come. Instead, the restlessness intensified. I began feeling watched, not in a frightening way, but in a way that made me aware of my own smallness. Like my life was being observed with purpose. I would feel sudden waves of emotion for no clear reason. Sadness for people I didn't know. Concern for places I had never been. And yet I told no one. I was afraid that if I spoke out loud what I was experiencing, it would become real. I was afraid of being wrong. Afraid of being called unstable. Afraid of disappointing God if I misunderstood him. Most of all, I was afraid that if God truly was calling me, my life would never be the same. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't understand then. God was preparing me. Not with comfort, but with awareness. Not with certainty, but with surrender. The accident didn't come out of nowhere. It came at the exact moment when I had reached the limit of myself. I didn't know it yet, but my ordinary life was about to end. And the next chapter of my existence would begin in a place no human words can fully describe. Signs I ignored. Looking back now, I can see the signs everywhere. At the time, I didn't want to. It's strange how the human heart works. When something threatens to disrupt the fragile balance we've built, we call it coincidence. We explain it away. We convince ourselves that ignoring the warning is safer than facing what it might demand from us. That was me. The signs didn't arrive all at once. They came quietly, patiently, almost mercifully. It began with time. Every night, without fail, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. Not around that time, not sometimes. Exactly that minute. I would open my eyes suddenly, as if someone had called my name. My room would be still. No noise, no fear. Just a heavy awareness that I was awake for a reason I couldn't understand. At first, I checked the clock and went back to sleep. Then I started feeling something else. A presence. Not physical, not visible, but real enough to make my heart beat faster. I would lie there, staring at the ceiling, feeling as if time itself had paused. I told myself it was stress. The country was unstable. Everyone was anxious. Why should I be any different? But then came the thoughts. They didn't feel like my own. I would suddenly think about places I had never visited, about leaders making decisions that would affect millions, about people crying out to God in desperation. These thoughts didn't come with images at first, just weight. Emotional weight that felt too heavy for one person to carry. During the day, the signs followed me. At work, patients began asking strange questions. Do you think God is warning the world? Do you feel like something big is coming? Have you noticed how everything feels unstable? These weren't deeply religious people. Some barely believed at all. And yet, they were voicing the same unease I felt but refused to speak. One afternoon, a woman I had never met before stopped me as I was leaving the clinic. She looked directly into my eyes and said, "God is closer than you think. Don't ignore him." I stood frozen. She didn't wait for a response. She simply walked away. That should have shaken me. Instead, I laughed nervously and told myself it was meaningless. Then came the dreams. They grew clearer, sharper, impossible to forget. In one dream, I stood above the earth, watching lights go out, entire regions falling into darkness while people ran in confusion. I didn't see violence. I didn't see blood. I saw fear, a deep collective fear that spread faster than sound. I woke up crying. In another dream, I saw two nations highlighted again and again, like names being pressed into my spirit. I didn't want to recognize them. I didn't want to ask why those places mattered. I never said the names out loud. I was afraid that acknowledging them would give them power. Instead, I distracted myself with noise, music playing constantly, television on even when I wasn't watching, conversations that stayed shallow on purpose. Silence had become dangerous. Silence was where the signs waited. My body began reacting too. Sudden fatigue. Moments where my chest felt tight. Not pain, but pressure. Like something inside me was urging me to slow down, to listen. Doctors found nothing wrong. Stress, they said. Rest more, they advised. So I rested. But the signs didn't stop. One Sunday, I finally went to church after weeks of avoiding it. I sat in the back, hoping to be unnoticed. The sermon topic that day was about God speaking before great shifts in history, about warnings being an act of mercy, not fear. I couldn't breathe. It felt like every word was aimed directly at me. I left before the service ended. That night, I argued with God for the first time in my life. Why me? I asked out loud. I'm not strong enough. I'm not worthy. Choose someone else. There was no thunder, no voice, no dramatic response, only a deep, unsettling peace. The kind of peace that doesn't comfort, but prepares. The final sign came the day before the accident. I was crossing the street on my way home when everything around me seemed to slow down. Cars, voices, even the wind. For a brief moment, I felt completely detached from my body, as if I were watching myself from a distance. And then a thought, clearer than anything I had ever heard in my mind. Be ready. I stopped walking. My heart raced. My hands trembled. I looked around, expecting something terrible to happen right then and there. But nothing did. Life continued as if nothing had changed, except everything had. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I sat on my bed until morning, holding my father's Bible against my chest, whispering the same words over and over. Jesus, I don't understand, but I'm listening. I didn't know that I was hours away from the moment that would separate my life into before and after forever. If I had understood what those signs truly meant, if I had realized how close the veil really was, maybe I would have been less afraid. Or maybe fear was part of what made the next moment possible, because the day that followed was the day I was not supposed to survive, the day that was not supposed to happen. The morning of the accident felt ordinary. That is the part that still unsettles me the most. There were no warning sirens, no dramatic signs in the sky, no feeling of panic when I opened my eyes. Just the same ceiling, the same quiet room, the same familiar weight of responsibility pressing gently on my chest. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, holding my coffee mug with both hands, staring at the steam as it rose and disappeared. I whispered a short prayer. Nothing poetic, nothing brave. Jesus, stay close today. I didn't know how literal that prayer would become. The city was already awake when I stepped outside. Cars moved slowly through traffic. People hurried along sidewalks. Vendors called out their offers. Life was moving forward, unaware that my own was approaching a sudden pause. On the bus ride to work, I felt strangely calm. Not happy, not anxious, just calm. As if my emotions had been gently turned down. I watched the streets pass by and noticed details I usually ignored. The color of the sky, the sound of children laughing somewhere in the distance, the rhythm of my own breathing. There was a moment when I thought, if this were my last normal day, I would want to remember this. That thought scared me. I arrived at the clinic early. The building smelled of disinfectant and paper, just like always. I greeted my coworkers, organized files, answered phones. Everything followed its usual pattern, as if the universe was intentionally pretending nothing was about to change. Around midday, I felt dizzy. Not enough to sit down. not enough to alarm anyone. Just enough to make the edges of the room feel slightly unreal, like a photograph that hadn't fully developed yet. I ignored it. I always did. By late afternoon, the sky had darkened unexpectedly. Thick clouds gathered, heavy and low. Rain began to fall, not violently, but steadily, as if the air itself was tired. When my shift ended, I hesitated at the door. A strange reluctance washed over me. A quiet voice inside whispered, "Wait." I checked my phone. No messages. No reason to stay. So I left. The street outside was wet and reflective, lights stretching across the pavement like broken mirrors. I pulled my jacket tighter and began walking toward the bus stop. Traffic was heavier than usual, drivers impatient, horns echoing through the narrow streets. As I stepped off the curb, time slowed. I don't know how else to describe it. The sound of the city faded, as if someone had turned down the volume of the world. I became intensely aware of my body, my heartbeat, my breath, the way my foot touched the ground. Then everything fractured. I heard a sudden noise, metal, motion, force, but it felt distant, muffled. I remember a sensation of being lifted, not thrown, not dragged, lifted. There was no pain at first, only confusion. My thoughts scattered, unable to form complete sentences. I tried to understand what was happening, but understanding slipped away, like trying to hold water in open hands. Then came the separation. One moment I was inside my body, the next, I wasn't. I watched from above as people rushed toward the scene. I saw my own body on the ground, still, surrounded by movement and voices that sounded far away. Someone was calling for help. Someone else was crying. And yet, I felt nothing. No fear, no panic, no attachment. It was as if the connection between who I was and what I saw had been gently, deliberately released. I remember thinking with surprising clarity, "That's me." But it doesn't feel like me anymore. The world below looked heavy, dense, slow, and I felt light. A profound calm wrapped around me, deeper than anything I had ever experienced. The worries that had defined my life, money, responsibility, fear of the future, fell away instantly, like clothes no longer needed. I didn't hear a voice yet. I didn't see a light yet. But I knew something with absolute certainty. I was not alone. The space around me felt aware, intentional, safe. I wasn't drifting randomly. I was being guided. As I moved farther from the scene below, the sounds of the world dissolved completely. There was no city, no rain, no urgency, only stillness, and a growing sense that I was approaching something sacred. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to turn back. I wanted to go forward, all at once. And then, for the first time since the accident, a thought formed clearly, calmly, without fear. This is not the end. That realization didn't come from logic. It came from knowing. The kind of knowing that doesn't need proof. I didn't understand where I was going, but I trusted where I was being taken. Behind me was the world I knew. Ahead of me was something infinitely greater. And I was crossing a boundary no human words are meant to describe. The moment of death. If I had to describe the moment of death in one word, it wouldn't be dark. It would be quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty or frightening, but the kind that feels intentional. Like everything unnecessary has finally stopped speaking. There was no pain the way people imagine it. No chaos. No struggle. What I felt was a release so complete that it shocked me. As I moved farther away from my body, time lost its meaning. There was no before or after. No ticking seconds, no urgency. The constant pressure that had lived in my chest for years, the pressure to decide, to fix, to survive, was gone. I didn't feel relieved because there was nothing left to be relieved from. I was aware, but not anxious. Present, but not attached. My memories began to surface, not as images, but as understanding. I didn't relive my life like a movie. Instead, I knew it. Every choice, every fear, every moment I had listened, and every moment I had ignored what I felt God asking of me. And yet, there was no accusation, no shame, only clarity. I understood in a way I never had before that fear had guided more of my life than faith. Not because I was weak, but because I was human. And that understanding didn't condemn me. It softened me. I became aware that I was moving through something like a boundary, not a wall, not a door. More like a transition. Gentle, deliberate, impossible to resist. The closer I moved, the more the world I had known faded, not erased, but placed at a distance, as if it belonged to another version of me. I didn't feel myself leaving life. I felt myself entering truth. There was a moment, brief but profound, when I wondered if I would be allowed to continue. Not because I felt judged, but because I felt small in the presence of something infinitely greater. And then I sensed it. A presence. Not behind me, not ahead of me, but around me. It wasn't shaped like a person at first. It was awareness. Complete, intelligent, loving awareness. It felt ancient and immediate at the same time, as if it existed outside of everything I understood. I didn't hear words yet, but I understood meaning. You are safe. That certainty settled into me more deeply than any reassurance I had ever received in life. It wasn't spoken. It was transmitted. And it reached parts of me I didn't know existed. I realized then that death was not a loss of consciousness. It was an expansion of it. I was more myself than I had ever been, without fear, without doubt, without the constant noise of the world telling me who I was supposed to be. There was no panic about unfinished tasks, no regret about unanswered messages, no longing for possessions or status or recognition. Those things felt irrelevant. What mattered was connection, truth, purpose. I became aware that something was being prepared for me, not given, not forced, but revealed, like a curtain being slowly drawn back. I sensed that I was about to encounter something, or someone, I had spent my entire life believing in, but never truly knowing. And that realization brought a feeling I had no human word for. It was not excitement. It was reverence. I understood then why people say life changes after moments like this. Because once you experience awareness without fear, you realize how much of life is lived running from silence, from stillness, from the questions that matter most. In that place, there was no running, only being. I didn't want to return, but I wasn't asking to stay. I was simply present. And then, without warning, without sound, the quiet shifted. Not broken, not disturbed, just transformed. A warmth began to surround me, brighter than anything I had known, yet gentle enough that it didn't overwhelm. It felt personal, intentional, alive, and I knew, without being told, I was about to meet him. When I realized I was outside my body, the realization didn't arrive with shock. It arrived with clarity. At some point, though point feels like the wrong word, because time no longer behaved the way it does on Earth, I understood fully that I was no longer connected to my physical body. Not intellectually, not as an idea, but as a certainty so deep it didn't require explanation. I wasn't floating randomly, I wasn't dreaming, I wasn't imagining. I was aware in a way I had never been before. Below me, the world looked distant, not smaller, but heavier, denser. Like everything carried weight there. Gravity, fear, urgency, consequence. I could see movement without feeling pulled by it. I could observe without being affected. For the first time in my existence, I was not trapped inside my own thoughts. There was no inner dialogue arguing with itself, no doubt interrupting peace, no voice telling me what I should feel. I simply was. I became aware that I could perceive without eyes. I didn't look the way I used to. I knew. Awareness expanded in every direction at once, effortless and complete. There was no front or back, no up or down, only presence. And with that awareness came understanding. I understood that my body was a vessel, necessary, valuable, but temporary. I had mistaken it for myself my entire life. Now, separated from it, I realized how limited my previous perception had been. I felt compassion, not judgment, for the version of me still lying there below. She had tried so hard. I became aware of emotions too, but they were different, purified. There was no anxiety attached to them, no desperation. When I felt concern for my family, it wasn't painful. It was loving, calm, trusting. I knew they would be okay. That knowledge didn't come from optimism. It came from truth. As I moved, though movement felt more like intention than motion. I noticed that distance responded to thought. When I focused on something, I was simply there. No effort, no resistance. That was when I understood something that changed me forever. Consciousness is not bound by space. I sensed that I was being guided but not controlled. There was a direction, a gentle pull, not like being dragged, but like being invited. I could have resisted. I somehow knew that, but I didn't want to. Trust came naturally here. The farther I went, the more the weight of earthly identity faded. Titles, roles, regrets, expectations. They didn't disappear. They just lost relevance. I wasn't an employee. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a citizen of any country. I was a soul, and I was known. That realization overwhelmed me. Not emotionally, but existentially. The awareness that I was fully seen, fully understood, without needing to explain or defend myself, it dissolved layers of fear I didn't even know I carried. I felt no need to hide. There was nothing to hide from. I became aware that communication here didn't require language. Meaning moved instantly. When I sensed something, I understood it completely, without translation. That's when I felt the peace deepen. Not peace as the absence of trouble, but peace as alignment. Everything felt exactly where it belonged. No friction, no confusion. I understood why people fear death so much on Earth. It's not death they fear, it's the unknown. But here, the unknown wasn't frightening. It was familiar, like returning to a place you had forgotten, not lost. I sensed memories that weren't memories, a recognition that went beyond this lifetime. Not specific images, not past scenes, but a knowing that existence was larger than one story. And then, as that awareness expanded, the environment began to change. Light emerged, not suddenly, not blindingly, but gradually, like dawn without a horizon. It didn't come from a source, it was the space itself, alive, intelligent, gentle. This light didn't cast shadows, it revealed. The closer I moved toward it, the more I felt welcomed. Not evaluated, not tested, welcomed. And with that welcome came another understanding. This was not a random experience. I wasn't here by accident. There was intention behind every moment, before, during, and after my separation from the body. Even the pain I had lived with on Earth now felt purposeful, not wasted. I didn't yet see a figure. I didn't yet hear a voice. But I knew, deeply, unmistakably, that I was approaching someone. Someone I had spoken about my entire life, but had never truly met. And as that awareness settled into me, a feeling rose that I had no resistance to at all. Surrender. Not the kind born of defeat, but the kind born of trust. I was ready. The peace that does not exist in this world. What surrounded me next was not silence, but harmony. It's difficult to explain peace when every word we have for it comes from a world where peace is temporary. On Earth, peace means rest after chaos, relief after fear, calm between storms. But what I experienced there was not a pause between troubles. It was a state of being. The peace didn't arrive from the outside. It unfolded from within me, expanding until there was no space left for tension, doubt, or resistance. It wasn't something I felt. It was something I became. I realized then how tense I had been my entire life without knowing it. How my body and mind had always been bracing for the next problem, the next disappointment, the next loss. Even in moments of happiness, part of me had stayed guarded. Here, there was no guard, no walls, no need for protection. The peace held me completely, like a presence that knew exactly how much I could receive without overwhelming me. It didn't numb me, it sharpened me. My awareness felt clearer, deeper, more alive than it had ever been. I understood something instantly. This peace did not erase individuality. It perfected it. I was still me, but me without fear. Emotions existed here, but they were purified. Love without attachment, joy without anxiety, understanding without judgment. Everything was saturated with meaning, yet nothing felt heavy. I sensed that this peace came from alignment, from being exactly where I was meant to be, doing exactly what I was meant to be doing, without resistance. It made me realize how much suffering on Earth comes not from pain itself, but from fighting reality. Here, there was no fight. I became aware of layers within myself dissolving. Layers I hadn't known were there. Old disappointments, unspoken grief, the weight of expectations I had carried for years. None of it mattered here. Not because it was insignificant, but because it had already been understood and resolved. I didn't need to explain my life. It had already been seen. The peace carried intelligence. It wasn't passive. It knew me. And in that knowing, I felt fully accepted. Not for who I pretended to be, but for who I truly was, including my fears, my doubts, my failures. Nothing disqualified me here. That realization broke something open inside me. Not painfully, but beautifully. I felt gratitude rise, vast and wordless. Gratitude not just for this moment, but for every moment that had led me here. Even the difficult ones. Especially the difficult ones. I began to understand that suffering on earth is not meaningless. It shapes perception. It teaches empathy. It prepares the soul to recognize truth when it finally encounters it. This peace did not erase the memory of pain. It transformed it. As I rested within this presence, I became aware that this state was not something humans could manufacture. It could not be achieved through effort, discipline, or belief alone. It was a gift, freely given, not earned. And yet, it was familiar. That surprised me. It felt like something I had known before, long ago, not in memory, but in essence. Like returning to a frequency my soul had been tuned to once, before life had layered it with fear and noise. I understood then why people chase peace in so many ways on earth, through success, relationships, control, escape. They are not chasing comfort. They are chasing home. And here, I was home. I didn't want to leave this peace. Not because I feared returning to life, but because this peace felt like truth itself. The idea of returning to limitation, to misunderstanding, to constant striving, it felt distant and unnecessary. And yet, even within this peace, I sensed movement. Not urgency, not force, purpose. The peace began to shift, not fading but focusing, like light narrowing into clarity. I felt attention being directed, not demanded. Something, or someone, was drawing nearer. The peace did not diminish. It deepened. And with it came a presence so unmistakable that I did not need to see it to recognize it. The peace had a source, a center, a heart. I felt seen in a new way, not observed but encountered. And before any words were spoken, before any form appeared, I knew exactly who stood before me. The peace was not just around me. It was him, the encounter with Jesus. I did not see him at first. I recognized him. That may sound strange, but recognition came before vision, before form, before words. It was as if every part of my being responded at once, mind, awareness, essence, aligning around a truth I had always known but never fully understood. This was Jesus, not the image I had grown up with. Not the paintings or symbols or stories filtered through culture and habit. This recognition did not come from memory. It came from relationship, one I had been unaware of, yet had never been absent. The presence before me was overwhelming, but not intimidating. Powerful, but not distant. There was authority, yes, but it was wrapped in humility so profound it dissolved any fear of judgment. I felt seen in a way that stripped me of all defenses, not exposed. Understood. As his presence became clearer, the light around me intensified, not brighter in a way that hurt, but deeper, richer, layered with meaning. This light was alive. It carried awareness. It responded to my presence as if it knew me intimately. I did not fall to my knees. I didn't need to. Every part of me had already bowed. The love emanating from him was unlike anything I had known. On earth, love often comes with expectation, with fear of loss, with conditions spoken or unspoken. This love asked nothing, demanded nothing, and yet it changed everything it touched. It was impossible to feel unworthy in his presence, not because I suddenly believed I was perfect, but because his love did not operate on merit. It operated on truth. I felt him look at me, not with eyes as we understand them, but with complete awareness. And in that gaze, I felt every version of myself being acknowledged at once. The child who believed easily, the woman who doubted quietly, the person who tried and failed and tried again. None of it disqualified me. None of it surprised him. I realized then that he had been present in every moment of my life, especially the ones where I felt most alone. The silence I had interpreted as absence had never been absence at all. It had been patience. When he communicated, it was not through spoken language. It was meaning, pure and direct, flowing into me without resistance. Yet, if I were to translate it into words, this is what I understood him to say: I have always been with you. Those words didn't comfort me. They restructured me. I saw moments from my life not as failures, but as intersections, points where I could have chosen fear or trust. I saw how often he had guided me gently, quietly, without force, and I saw how often I had ignored that guidance, not out of rebellion, but out of fear. And still, he never withdrew. There was no disappointment in him, only love that understood limitation. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to explain myself. I wanted to justify my doubts, my hesitation, my small faith. But the moment those impulses arose, they dissolved. Explanation was unnecessary. He already knew. And more than that, he accepted me completely. I understood then something that changed my view of faith forever. Jesus does not seek perfection. He seeks honesty. In his presence, I felt no pressure to be more spiritual, more obedient, more worthy. I was invited simply to be fully, truthfully, without masks. The peace intensified, and within it came clarity. I sensed that this encounter was not just for me. There was purpose behind it, careful, intentional, weighty. His presence shifted slightly, not away, but into focus. And with that shift came gravity. Not fear, but importance. I understood that what would follow was not optional. It was entrusted. Before any revelation was shown, before any warning was given, I felt something else from him, something deeply personal. Sorrow, not weakness, not despair. Sorrow born of love. I sensed his grief for humanity, not as condemnation, but as compassion. He was not angry with the world, he was aching for it. For the confusion, the division, the fear masquerading as power. I felt how deeply he loved people who did not love him back, how patiently he waited for hearts hardened by pain, pride, or distraction. And then I understood why I was there. Not because I was chosen above others, but because I was willing to listen now. That realization humbled me more than anything else. I felt him draw my attention, not forcefully, but firmly, like a teacher preparing a student for difficult knowledge. I sensed that what he was about to show me would be unsettling, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. And before the visions came, before the warnings, before the message that would change my life forever, he communicated one final assurance, clear and unshakable. Do not be afraid. What you will see is meant to awaken, not to destroy. I felt strength enter me, not my own, but given. A steadiness that told me I would be able to carry what was coming. Because love was not just present. Love was in control. The 5 revelations about 2026. When the first revelation came, it did not arrive as a threat. It arrived as clarity. Jesus did not show me dates on a calendar or dramatic scenes meant to shock. What he revealed was deeper than images. It was understanding. I perceived events not as isolated disasters, but as consequences. Movements set in motion long before they became visible. And I understood immediately. 2026 would be a year of exposure. Not punishment, exposure. The first revelation concerned false stability. I was shown how systems that appeared strong, financial, political, and social, were far more fragile than people believed. In the United States, I sensed a sudden shaking of confidence. Not just economic uncertainty, but a deeper fear. The realization that what many trusted for security could not protect them. It wasn't total collapse. It was something more unsettling, confusion. I felt how quickly comfort can turn into fear when predictability disappears. How people who had never questioned the future would suddenly feel vulnerable. Jesus did not show chaos. He showed awakening discomfort. And I understood the message clearly. When people trust structures more than truth, fear becomes their teacher. The second revelation focused on division intensifying before healing. I saw words becoming weapons. Not physical violence, but communication breaking down. In both the United States and Venezuela, conversations would harden, people speaking past one another. listening to respond, not to understand. Families divided, communities fragmented. What struck me most was not anger, it was exhaustion. A deep weariness from constant conflict, from living in a state of emotional defense. I sensed that many would feel trapped between extremes, longing for peace but unsure where to find it. Jesus made something very clear to me in that moment. Division is loud, but it is not permanent. The third revelation was the one that made my spirit tremble, not with fear, but with gravity. I was shown a moment of collective fear triggered by an unexpected event. Not a single nationwide catastrophe, but a moment that spread rapidly through information, news, messages, screens, a situation that caused people to ask, "Are we safe?" The fear itself was the danger, not the event. I felt how quickly panic could move through hearts when uncertainty is amplified. And I understood that in 2026, fear would travel faster than truth for a time. But Jesus did not leave it there. He showed me people responding differently, some collapsing inward, others turning upward. That contrast was intentional. The fourth revelation involved Venezuela specifically, and it carried both warning and hope. I was shown pressure increasing, social, emotional, and spiritual, a feeling of being stretched beyond limits. But instead of breaking, I saw something unexpected, a quiet turning, not toward politics, not toward ideology, toward God. I sensed prayer rising not from institutions, but from homes, from individuals who had reached the end of self-reliance, people who no longer prayed out of tradition, but out of desperation and sincerity. Jesus communicated this to me very clearly. When hope is stripped of illusions, it becomes real. The fifth revelation was the most personal and the most difficult to receive. It was about choice. I understood that 2026 would not be defined by what happens to people, but by how they respond within it. Fear would be available, distraction would be available, anger would be available, but so would awakening, so would humility, so would return. Jesus did not say everyone would choose wisely, but he showed me that many would. I saw people questioning old assumptions, letting go of identities built on pride or comfort, seeking truth not to win arguments, but to survive spiritually. And then he impressed this truth into me with unmistakable clarity. These events are not sent to terrify, but to reveal what cannot be shaken. I realized then why he had been so gentle with me earlier, why love had come before warning. Because fear alone paralyzes, but love prepares. The revelations were not about destruction, they were about decision. As the understanding settled into me, I felt the weight of responsibility return. Not as burden, but as mission. I knew I would be sent back. I knew this knowledge was not meant to stay with me. And before the visions faded, I felt one final emphasis from him. Clear, firm, and urgent. Tell them not to harden their hearts. Tell them this is a moment to listen. The light around me began to soften. The clarity remained, but the intensity shifted. I sensed that what came next would be difficult, not because of what I had seen, but because I would have to return to a world that had not. The warning that made me tremble. Of everything Jesus revealed to me, this was the part I struggled most to accept. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was terrifying in the way people imagine fear, but because it was painfully honest. The warning did not come as a vision of destruction. It came as understanding. A sudden, heavy clarity that settled into me with a seriousness I had never felt before. It wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. It was sober. Jesus allowed me to perceive something that shook me deeply. How close people can be to truth and still miss it. I felt the weight of familiarity. How words repeated too often can lose their meaning. How faith, when turned into routine, can become invisible to the very people who depend on it. This warning was not directed at atheists. It was not aimed at those who openly rejected God. It was for the comfortable. I sensed that in 2026, many people, especially in places where faith had become cultural rather than personal, would face a moment of inner confrontation. Not persecution, not force. A question. A quiet one. Do you actually trust me, or only the idea of me? That question carried more weight than any disaster ever could. I was shown people who spoke about God easily, but listened to him rarely. People who defended belief passionately while avoiding obedience quietly. People who used faith as identity rather than relationship. And what made me tremble was not judgment, but sorrow. Jesus was not angry. He was grieving. I felt how deeply it wounded him to be discussed constantly, but consulted rarely, quoted, but not followed, praised with words while ignored in decisions. The warning was simple but devastating in its simplicity. Many will mistake familiarity for intimacy. That truth pierced me. I realized how easily I myself had done that. Spoken to him without truly listening, prayed without expecting response, believed without surrender. Jesus showed me that the greatest danger ahead was not fear from events, but numbness of the heart. I sensed that as uncertainty increased in 2026, people would look for explanations everywhere: politics, media, ideology, conspiracy, anger. They would analyze endlessly while avoiding the one place where clarity could be found: silence with God. The warning continued, not as condemnation, but as invitation. I felt Jesus urging urgency, not panic. He was not asking people to hide or prepare physically. He was asking them to return. Return to humility. Return to listening. Return to sincerity. He showed me how noise would increase, opinions multiplying, voices competing, information overwhelming. And in that noise, the stillness required to hear him would become uncomfortable. Many would avoid it, not because it was unavailable, but because it was inconvenient. That realization shook me deeply. Then I felt the most sobering part of the warning. Some prayers would go unanswered, not because God was silent, but because people were unwilling to hear the answer. I understood then that unanswered prayer is not always rejection. Sometimes it is resistance. Jesus was clear with me about this. I will not shout over pride. That statement carried immense gravity. He was not withdrawing. He was waiting for hearts willing to quiet themselves, waiting for people who would stop demanding explanations and start seeking transformation. I saw how this warning applied to both nations I had been shown, but also to individuals everywhere. It was not about geography. It was about posture. The trembling I felt did not come from fear of consequences. It came from recognition, from seeing how easily I, and so many others, could miss the most important moment by being distracted by lesser ones. I wanted to ask him how to fix it, how to warn everyone properly, how to make people listen. But the answer came before the question fully formed. Live it, speak it, trust me with the rest. That was all. No strategy, no guarantee of being believed, no promise of comfort, just obedience. I felt the weight of responsibility settle on me again, not as pressure, but as seriousness. This message was not meant to impress. It was meant to awaken. And then I sensed a transition. The gravity remained, but the focus shifted. Something else was coming, something more personal, more immediate. I felt distance returning, density, resistance. The peace began to thin, not disappearing, but pulling back, like a tide preparing to turn. And suddenly, I understood. I was going back. You must return. The realization came gently, but it carried weight. I didn't hear the words at first. I felt them. A shift in direction, a subtle resistance that hadn't existed before. The peace that had surrounded me so completely did not disappear, but it no longer carried me forward. It was turning me back. At first I resisted, not with panic, but with longing. The thought of returning to the heaviness of the world felt unbearable compared to the clarity I had just known. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply felt sorrow. Jesus understood that immediately. There was no reprimand in him, no impatience, only compassion so deep it steadied me. I sensed his awareness of how difficult it would be to leave a place where truth was effortless and re-enter a world where everything felt distorted by fear and noise. And then the meaning came clearly, unmistakably. You must return. Those words did not feel like a command. They felt like trust. I understood that returning was not a punishment. It was a responsibility. What I had been shown was not meant to stay contained within me. It was meant to move outward, through a life that would now be forever changed. I felt hesitation, not rebellion, but grief. Grief at leaving this presence. Grief at re-entering limitation. Grief at knowing how difficult it would be to speak about things most people would dismiss, misunderstand, or fear. Jesus allowed me to feel that fully. He did not rush me. Instead, I sensed him strengthening me, not emotionally, but inwardly, like reinforcing something at the core of who I was. I felt clarity settle into resolve. Fear did not disappear, but it lost authority. I understood then that courage is not the absence of fear. It is obedience in its presence. I sensed him communicating something else, something crucial. You are not responsible for how they respond, only for telling the truth with love. That released a weight I hadn't realized I was already carrying. I didn't need to convince anyone. I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to be believed. I only needed to be faithful. As that understanding settled, the environment around me began to change. The light softened further. The sense of expansion began to contract, not painfully, but deliberately, like awareness folding back into form. I felt gravity again, not physical yet, but directional, a pull toward density, toward boundaries, toward time. The transition was not sudden, it was merciful. As I moved away, I felt one last wave of peace wash through me, stronger than before, as if to anchor itself within me so I could carry it back. I understood that I would need it. The world I was returning to would not feel gentle. It would feel loud. Before the separation completed, I sensed Jesus impart something final. Not words, but assurance. I will not leave you when you return. That mattered more than anything else. The movement intensified. Awareness narrowed. The vastness I had known began to compress into something smaller, more confined. I felt resistance for the first time since leaving my body. Not emotional resistance, but physical limitation approaching. I became aware of sensation again. Weight, pressure, sound. The transition back into the body was disorienting. Not because it was painful, but because it was overwhelming. After existing without boundaries, boundaries felt foreign, heavy, restrictive. I felt breath return suddenly, sharp, urgent. Sound rushed in chaotically, voices, movement, confusion. The peace did not vanish, but it retreated to the background, like a steady current beneath turbulent water. I was aware of people around me. I sensed urgency, concern, voices calling out. I did not understand their words at first. Language took effort again, meaning no longer flowed effortlessly. And then came the hardest part, remembering. I was aware that what I had experienced could fade if I didn't hold on to it carefully. Not because it wasn't real, but because the human mind struggles to contain what exists beyond it. I felt tears, not from pain, but from contrast, from the sudden distance between where I had been and where I now was. I wanted to go back, not in death, but in awareness. But I understood that this was now my task, to live on earth with memory of heaven. That is not easy. Recovery was slow, confusing, emotionally intense. My body felt unfamiliar. My thoughts felt loud. The world felt abrasive. And yet beneath all of it, something had changed permanently. Fear no longer ruled me. Not because life would be easy, but because I had seen what lies beyond it. I knew my life no longer belonged solely to me, and that knowledge carried both weight and purpose. As I lay there, struggling to fully return, one thought repeated itself. Clear, steady, unyielding. I have been sent back for a reason. The mission I cannot ignore. Returning to life did not feel like a victory. At first, it felt like loss. The world I re-entered was louder than I remembered. Sharper, faster. Everything demanded attention. Voices, news, expectations, fears. My body recovered slowly, but my mind struggled even more. I carried something inside me that had no proper place in ordinary conversation. How do you speak about peace in a world addicted to noise? How do you talk about listening to God in a culture trained to scroll past silence? For weeks, I said nothing. Not because I doubted what I had experienced, but because I understood the weight of it. Once spoken, the message would no longer belong only to me. It would confront others. And confrontation, even gentle, makes people uncomfortable. But the silence didn't last. It never does when truth is involved. I began noticing how different everything felt. The fears that once controlled me no longer had the same power. Bad news still hurt, but it didn't destabilize me. Uncertainty still existed, but it didn't paralyze me. Something had shifted permanently. I could feel it most clearly when I prayed. Prayer was no longer a routine, it was connection. I no longer spoke at God, I listened with Him. And that's when the urgency began. Not anxiety, not pressure. Urgency. a steady inner awareness that time mattered, that distraction was dangerous, that people were living loudly while starving spiritually and didn't even know it. I remembered what Jesus had shown me: the exposure, the division, the fear, the choice, and most of all, the warning about familiarity without intimacy. I understood then that my mission was not to predict headlines. It was to call people back to listening, to remind them that God is not silent. He is patient. And patience has limits, not because love ends, but because moments pass. I began sharing carefully at first. One person, then another. Conversations that started cautiously but ended in tears. Not fear, but recognition. People admitting they felt the same unease, the same sense that something was coming, the same hunger for truth beneath all the noise. That's when I realized this message was not just for the United States or Venezuela. It was for anyone who feels that the world is moving fast and the soul is falling behind. Let me ask you something directly, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments. Have you felt this restlessness too? Do you sense that something is shifting even if you can't explain it? Write yes if this resonates with you. Or write what you're feeling, don't overthink it. Because one of the most important things I learned is this: God often speaks before we're ready, so we can become ready. The mission I was given is simple, but not easy. To tell people not to harden their hearts. To remind them that silence with God is not emptiness, it's where clarity begins. To warn without fear, to love without compromise. I was not sent back to be dramatic. I was sent back to be faithful. If you're watching this and thinking, why does this feel personal? That's not an accident. Truth doesn't shout, it recognizes. Another question for you, and please answer this one too. If God were speaking quietly right now, would your life be loud enough to drown him out? Sit with that. You don't need to change everything today. You don't need to understand everything, but you do need to listen. Because 2026 is not about terror. It's about revelation. About what people are really standing on. About what remains when comfort is shaken and distractions lose their power. And the greatest tragedy would not be fear. It would be missing the invitation hidden inside it. I didn't come back with dates to obsess over. I came back with a call to awaken, to pray honestly, to live intentionally, to stop mistaking routine for relationship. And now, this mission includes you. If this message touched you in any way, write in the comments. What do you feel God is asking you to listen to right now? Your words may help someone else realize they're not alone. And if you want to continue this journey, if you want messages that don't entertain fear but awaken faith, subscribe to this channel. Not for algorithms, not for numbers, but because what comes next matters. Stay awake, stay humble, stay listening, because God is closer than most people realize, and He is still speaking. This is why I could not stay silent. There is something I need you to understand before this ends. I did not come back from that experience feeling special. I came back feeling responsible. Responsible not because I know more than others, but because once you see clearly, you can no longer pretend you don't. Once you hear truth without noise, you can no longer hide behind distraction. That is the real weight of what I was given. Not visions, not predictions, but awareness. The world you and I are living in right now is not normal chaos. It is not just another difficult season. There is a spiritual tension underneath everything, an unease people try to explain with news, politics, money, or fear. But the root is deeper. People are tired, not physically, but spiritually. They are overwhelmed, not by work, but by noise. They are afraid, not because of events, but because they feel unanchored. And that is why this message matters. 2026 is not a deadline. It is a mirror. It will reflect what people are truly trusting. Some will cling tighter to control. Some will harden their hearts. But others, many others, will finally stop running. They will listen. If you are still watching this, it is not by accident. Let me ask you something important, and please answer this honestly in the comments. When was the last time you sat in silence, not scrolling, not speaking, and simply allowed God to speak? Not asking Him to fix something, not asking Him to explain everything, just listening. Because one of the clearest things I learned is this: God does not compete with noise. He waits, and waiting is an act of love. But it is not endless. I was shown that fear will be loud in the coming years. Opinions will be louder. Distraction will be constant. And in that environment, the greatest spiritual danger is not sin or doubt. It is numbness. Be careful not to become so familiar with faith that you forget how to encounter God. Be careful not to replace obedience with opinions. Be careful not to confuse being informed with being prepared. Preparation is not physical. It is internal. A listening heart, a humble spirit, a willingness to be changed, not just comforted. Another question for you. Please answer this one too. If everything you rely on was shaken, what would still be standing in your life? Your answer matters more than you think. I am not here to tell you what to fear. I am here to tell you what cannot be shaken. God is not distant. He is not silent. He is not angry. But he is calling, quietly, persistently, lovingly. And those who listen will not be led by panic, but by clarity. If this message resonated with you even a little, write "I'm listening" in the comments. Not for me, but as a personal decision. And if you want to continue receiving messages like this, messages meant to awaken, not entertain, subscribe to this channel and stay connected. What comes next will require discernment, not fear. Do not let this be just another video you watched. Let it be a moment you responded to. Because the most important thing Jesus showed me was this: the greatest changes do not begin with events. They begin with hearts that finally decide to listen. Stay awake, stay humble, and above all, stay listening.